Question 10, part C, we're given the power P in the circuit is given by P of t, which is the product of V of t and I of t. So I've written out V of t in the red and the I of t in the magenta there. And we need to sketch the graph of y equals P of t for t greater than or equal to 0, but less than 0.02. And we also need to show the coordinates of the first maximum and the first minimum. So we're going to need our graphing calculator to help us do this. But before we do that, we can just plug in a couple of the coordinates that we can work out quite easily. So for example, when t is equal to 0, well, sine of 100 pi times t, if t is 0, that is just going to give us sine of 0, and hence P of t is just going to equal 0. So when t is 0, then P of t is 0, so it'll be 1 point on the graph. And also when t is 0.02, well, 100 times 0.02 is just 2, so we're going to get sine of 2 pi for V of t, and sine of 2 pi is equal to 0, and hence our P of t is going to equal 0. So when t is 0.02, P of t is equal to 0. So now we'll bring up our graphing calculator and graph this function, and then we'll work out the first maximum and the first minimum. Okay, so just bringing up a new graph page, and we'll enter our function in. So it's written here f1 of x, so we'll just leave the x there, just to make it easy to put things into the calculator. So wherever we see a t in our function up here, we'll just use an x on the calculator. So first of all, just to make things a little bit simpler, we've got 3 and a 2 there, so 3 times 2, I'll just plug in 6. So we're going to have 6 times sine of 100 times pi times x, and then we're going to multiply that by sine of 100 times pi, and just be careful with the brackets here, so brackets x plus 0.003, and graphing that, so we get this, which looks very confusing at the moment. So if we just adjust the window, let's go to window settings, and I'll just use the x min as 0 and the x max as 0.02. Okay, so that is the graph that we want to sketch. So now we'll go about working out our first maximum and our first minimum. So our first maximum looks as though it's about here, and the first minimum about there. So we'll go to menu, analyze graph, and we'll find our maximum first. Just there and going over. So we can see the coordinates are when x is equal to 0.0035 and 4.76 to 3 significant figures. So just as a side note, if you go to settings, you can change the amount of decimal places that the graph will show. So I've set it to 6, just to make sure I've got enough decimal places to be accurate with this question. Okay, so that's the coordinates of our first maximum. So that's going to be when t is equal to 0.0035 and P of t is equal to 4.76. So we'll just make a note of that. Okay, and now we'll find the coordinates of our first minimum. So if we go back to menu, then to analyze graph, click minimum this time, and click to one side, and there it is there. So that's at the point 0.0085 and to negative 1.24 if we're rounding that to 3 significant figures. Okay, and so we'll make a note of that now. So now that we've got our first maximum and first minimum points, we can go about plotting these points on the graph and then making a sketch of the graph. So before I start doing the sketch, I'm just going to find the coordinates of the other maximum and minimum point, just to make things easier when we come to sketch it. So if we just go Menu, Analyze Graph, find our maximum, so that's there, 0.0135, and our minimum is going to be 0.0185. Okay, so plotting these maximum and minimum points then. So for the first one, 0.0035 and 4.76. So it's going to be up around, say here somewhere. And then first minimum, 0.0085 and negative 1.24. So that's say about there. And then the other ones were 0.0135 and 4.76. So say about here. And finally, our last minimum point was 0.0185. So that was about there. So now we can join these points up and make our sketch. So a graph will look something like this. It's not 100% accurate or anything, but as long as we get the basic shape correct and mark in our maximum and minimum points, which I've done there in red, then we'll get 4 marks for this question. And we can also note that when t is equal to 0.01, well then p of t is equal to 0. And that's just because we've got this part here for v of t, the sine of 100 pi times t. So 100 times 0.01 is just 1, so then we get sine of pi, which is 0, and therefore p of t is going to equal 0. So the more points you know on your graph before you start drawing it, it becomes much easier to sketch. Okay, so that is question 10c.